keen to develop your understanding of exactly what's required to get full marks within the OCR GCSE English Language Paper 1 Section B, well, you're in the right place. I'm going to unpick the mark scheme in meticulous details and give you sample sentences and paragraphs taken from a past paper question which would achieve full marks. I'm also going to give you a full model response on this past paper question, as well as give you some tips to show you exactly what you need to be doing in order to be able to write better non-fiction text. So you're in the right place. Stay tuned because you're watching Schofield on Shakespeare. Right.
So here are the two questions in the OCR sample assessment paper. You can either write a speech or an article. However, to some extent, the effectiveness of your response is likely to depend on your familiarity with non-fiction text. How often do you read newspapers, online articles, magazines, letters even? And if you don't do this, why not start now? And in relation to these two questions, you might well decide to use key phrases and do some searches within certain news-based websites. This is the Daily Mail, and irrespective of whether you agree with its political opinions, the articles tend to be extremely well written and also interesting. So we could go within the search here and write something like "violence is not the solution." Let's see what we come up with. So we go down here, and of course, in relation to violence, it would be topical to reference the most appalling shooting within Texas at a primary school. If we go down here, and actually if we go up, if we go to relevance, to see words that match that phrase, articles that match that phrase a little bit more sharply. We've got some things there on Obama talking about a solution for violence. We've got a reference to Israel and Palestine. Now, I suspect this article is not necessarily looking for a global perspective, but nonetheless, reading these articles is likely to be helpful. In relation to the other question, then we could well type in a phrase for that. Let's try stresses of modern life. And here, perhaps we have some even more pertinent articles. Leaving the stresses of modern life. We've got here, does Harry Potter magic away the stresses of modern life? A link perhaps between problems with Wi-Fi and how stressful that can be in modern life. So clearly taking time to read these articles and also to look at how they're written is likely to help you with this part of the paper. For me, the first question about violence is a little wishy-washy. Of course, violence is not the solution to conflict. And so, if I was taking this paper, I would choose question 6, an article for a teenage magazine which gives advice to young people on how to cope with the pressures and stresses of modern life. Now, part of me feels I might be able to get some ideas for this piece of writing from this Daily Mail article. So what are their tips for how to survive modern life? Fall in love with Mondays, be a hugger, try gratitude alphabet, get 8 hours of sleep, be kind to others, hydrate. The issue I have with this, though, is that this seems to be aimed very much at older female readers, whereas, of course, our article is aimed at teenagers. One would imagine that a website with the name Teens Health is likely to include some more appropriate advice. So here we have some of their suggestions. Balance responsibilities, manage responsibilities, and there's some tips there about using a planning app, importance of healthy foods, get proper sleep, importance of exercise. But actually, the way this is written is perhaps not that exciting and may not result in that grade 9 you're all hoping for. What about how articles are written? Well, note the use of capital letters for emphasis. The opening sentence of the article tells us exactly what the article is going to be about. Articles contain, or are supposed to contain, factual information, so it's helpful to give plenty of details about the experts so your reader gets the sense you know what you are talking about. Here we have the full name, full job title with psychologist spelt accurately, age and the name of her book. Articles also tend to use short paragraphs and include quotations from the experts, which use accurate punctuation around the speech marks. However, at times you need to mix things up, and here the advice is summarised rather than quoted directly.
So you're beginning to get some ideas of the content and what to include within your article. Let's now move to dissecting the GCSE mark scheme. I'm going to take each bullet point in turn, and then I'm going to give you some of my own sentences which could be incorporated within an actual section B response.
The mark scheme is split into two sections with up to 24 marks available for AO5 and 16 for AO6. The top band for AO5 states that you need to deliberately adapt the form to position the reader and show a sophisticated control of purpose and effect. Now, this is quite tricky to do on an individual sentence or paragraph level. However, perhaps this short piece of writing begins to meet the requirements of deliberately adapting form to position the reader. You are not alone. From St Ives to Skegness, from Rotherham to Rochester, we have all struggled during this wretched pandemic. Instead of freedom to roam and explore, we have been caged. Instead of banter and good humour within the classroom, we have experienced the mind-numbing tedium of online learning. Unsurprisingly, our mental health has suffered. Notice the subheading "You are not alone" aims sharply at my audience, emphasising that I know how much teenagers have had to deal with during the pandemic. Notice also the reference to different parts in all corners of the UK. The implication is that the effects of the pandemic upon teenage life have been widespread, and so, by implication, there is nothing to be ashamed of for having experienced some difficulties. And notice the use of anaphora when I repeat the structure instead of. This allows me to build up in a sophisticated way and to make sharp contrast between what teenagers would typically be able to do during normal life and what they have had to endure during the pandemic. The second bullet point for the top band of the AO5 mark scheme dictates that the tone, style and register are ambitiously selected and deployed to enhance the purpose of the task. Again, this can be tricky to demonstrate within just a few sentences. But essentially, your tone and style need to sound mature and goddamn interesting and engaging to read. Something perhaps a little like, within today's Instagram-soaked world, looking good matters. Guys can no longer pull on a stinky, sweaty Babes Rock t-shirt and claim to be ready. Girls are painfully aware that creating that perfect casual look needs meticulous care and preparation, and ideally a Primark store within tottering distance. Yet we also need to recognise that those apparently nonchalant, oh so relaxed pouts on social media are constructs rather than representative of reality. I try to create a mildly humorous tone in my stereotypical presentation of a guy in a naff Babes Rock t-shirt. A more interesting, sophisticated tone is also created through phrases such as Instagram soaked and tottering distance, implying something about the girl's choice of shoes. There is also a confident, interesting tone created through the dismantling of Instagram photos. The pouts, rather than smiles, which is so 20th century Facebook, are apparently nonchalant and oh so relaxed, with the hyphenated adjective creating a hyperbolic feel, which results in the reader questioning just how relaxed these teenagers really are. And AO5 is also looking for a skillfully controlled overall structure. There are a number of ways to achieve this, but one tip I use for descriptive writing can potentially be utilised here when writing for audience impact and purpose, namely a circular structure. Here's how this might work. My introductory paragraph might start with raging hormones, parents who simply don't get it, peer pressure, and crippling anxieties about our appearance and bodies. Yes, there's no doubt that teenagers have so much to deal with, and that's before even mentioning the dreaded C word, COVID that is. And then in my concluding paragraph, I might write, raging hormones, parents who may be beginning to get it, increased kindness, and some understanding of our insecurities in relation to our appearance and bodies. Let's make life easier for ourselves as we try to navigate the complexities of our modern world. By repeating the key ideas, but in a more positive light, i.e. parents who previously simply didn't get it may be beginning to get it, the implication may be that by following the advice in the article, our teenage lives will be improved. In terms of how this is written, note the deliberately grammatically incomplete for effect opening sentence. There is no main verb, and this helps provide a dramatic, abrupt opening. Note also the wide range of punctuation. There is the use of quotation marks to reflect the exasperated potential words of a misunderstood teen, and the reassuring use of brackets to confirm which particular swear word beginning with a C is being referred to. Time to move on to explore the top band for AO6, which is out of 16. First up, the need for an ambitious range of sentences to shape meaning and create impact. Well, to a certain extent, we have just seen this within the previous example. Provided every single other sentence has a main clause and is grammatically correct, this is indeed a different type of sentence structure aimed to create impact on the reader at the beginning of the article. Let's now look at how an entire paragraph can aim to vary sentence structures as much as possible for maximum effect. Even though most of us are loath to admit it, getting into a positive sleep routine can make a big difference to our moods and energy levels. Calm negotiations with parents about bedtimes, with different times allocated for weekdays and weekends, can result in reduced conflict and, most importantly, a greater sense of well-being. Good quality sleep makes us happier, and the value of reduced parental nagging cannot be overstated. 11 p.m. on a weekday and 1 a.m. on a weekend? Later? Earlier? Either way, getting into regular routines will benefit all parties. How does this paragraph use an ambitious range of sentence structures? Well, on one simple level, every single sentence starts with a different word, a good habit to get into, or at least something to look out for. Endless sentences starting with the can be very tedious. But also note the variety within the types of sentence structures. The first sentence is a complex one, which starts with the subordinate clause. The second sentence, believe it or not, is, in spite of its length, a simple one. There is just one main verb and one main clause. And the third sentence is compounds, two equal main clauses, in this case linked by the conjunction and. So, following this complex, simple and compound sentence, we move to some much shorter rhetorical questions. Questions which involve the reader by definition for effect, before ending the paragraph with a short, complex sentence which confidently sums up the potential value of a sleep routine for teenagers. If you found some of that explanation rather technical, I would recommend watching the videos shown here, which includes a detailed explanation and examples of simple, compound and complex sentences. AO6 also requires accurate punctuation to enhance clarity and achieve particular effects, which for me means that you will need to use more than just full stops, commas, exclamation and question marks. You will also need to use a semicolon accurately, perhaps 2 or 3 in the entire piece, no more. And how about a single cheeky colon as well? As I do within the following single paragraph for our teen magazine article. The pressure to achieve a dizzying array of top grades in examinations can be intense in so many schools and families. We need to be clear with teachers and parents, unnecessary pressure is counterproductive. Yes, good grades matter, but these should not come at the expense of our mental well-being. Teenage years are difficult enough without bearing the weight of our parents' own failures, Teenage years need to be enjoyed. The colon is used as the clause unnecessary pressure is counterproductive, explains and expands upon the need for teenagers to be clear with adults in their lives. Meanwhile, the semicolon creates a nice feeling of symmetry and aids the repetition for effect of teenage years. Next up, vocabulary. It needs to be precise and subtle, with complex ideas expressed with clarity. Returning to a past paragraph, precise and subtle vocabulary is perhaps seen within words or phrases such as Instagram soaked, meticulous, tottering, nonchalant, and constructs. Finally, spelling. Can you spot the errors within this doctored previous response? There are 5 to find. Press pause to find them now. Pressure has, of course, 2 S's. Meanwhile, remember that when pluralizing a noun ending in Y, it will usually change to an I. Unnecessary is often spelled wrong. It's double N and double S. And then the 2 homophone errors. BARE means naked, not accepting or tolerating something. Whilst this weight is about how heavy or burdensome something is, not about having to hang around rather frustratingly. You should have got plenty of ideas from my discussions of the questions above and use of examples in relation to individual strands of the mark scheme. So, over to you. In the exam, you will have 1 hour to write your writing for audience impact and purpose response. Press pause within this video and write an outstanding response to either question 5 or 6. Good luck. Here's what I wrote. God, our parents had it so much easier, so much simpler. Navigating modern life as a teenager can be a veritable minefield. This article will give you a number of tips so that, metaphorically speaking, of course, your head doesn't get blown up. Yes, we love our smartphones, but whereas our parents simply had to deal with the occasional ticking off following the arrival of a distressingly large phone bill, our smartphones throw up far more complex issues. Yes, they can provide virtually unlimited joy and entertainment, aided by leeching older siblings' Netflix accounts, but it can be difficult to switch off in both senses. I would recommend setting up a routine in which at 11 p.m. every weekday evening the smartphone is turned off until the morning, even if this results in interrupting WhatsApp banter. Our friends will survive without us. After a month, reassess your energy levels and zest for life after all of that additional sleep. Looking good matters. Within today's Instagram-soaked world, looking good matters for both boys and girls. This is obviously a good thing. Who wants to see baggy t-shirts, 1960s crew cuts, and sprouting chest hair these days? However, we also need to recognise that the majority of apparently spur-of-the-moment, oh so relaxed Instagram photos have taken, in reality, hours to create. Hotly debated decisions about clothing with a trip to TK Maxx likely to have taken place at some point. Careful planning in terms of location. And more than 100 photos taken in order that the final picture can be just perfect. So, let's enjoy each other's creations, but recognise them for what they are: fake. Academic success is not the be-all and end-all. And how about the pressure our parents put on us in terms of exam results? Do they not realise that a significant number of today's millionaires have become successful through their own initiative and entrepreneurship in relation to emerging technology, rather than a string of top grades in yesterday's subjects? I would recommend having a discussion with parents early on within a public exam year. Talk about your own expectations and agree upon some realistic goals. If you show your parents that you have thought carefully not just about the short term but further afield, they are likely to be more supportive and nag less. COVID has affected us all. The COVID pandemic has taken a toll on all of us. Some of us have lost loved ones. Some of us retain mental health scars following the various unnecessary, in my opinion, lockdowns. Some of us have lost confidence. Some psychologists feel that the long-term devastation caused by the combination of the pandemic and decisions taken by various governments across the world will only be fully understood in around 10 years' time. In the meantime, we need to start enjoying our lives again and recognise that the chances of any of us getting ill from this wretched disease have always been slim and were made even slimmer following the advent of the various vaccinations. So don't feel guilty about going out and spending time with friends. To commandeer a phrase stolen by a well-known sports brand, just do it. Finally, yes, our parents had it so much easier, so much simpler. However, we can reclaim our teenage years by, essentially, being a little kinder to ourselves and communicating more clearly with our parents and family members. Let's enjoy life. As Chris Martin from Coldplay sang at the turn of the century, life is for living. So, why does this response receive full marks? Let's pick out a few things. Well, we have the exasperated, engaging opening few sentences, which clearly show a close understanding of the task, i.e. that this is an article for a teenage magazine. Note also the ambitious vocabulary from the off, including navigating, veritable, minefield, and the phrase metaphorically speaking. I show early on that I can use a range of accurate punctuation to enhance clarity and achieve particular effects. The colon allows me to explain why navigating modern life as a teen can be so tricky, whilst the use of dashes clarifies the fact that I'm not referring to a literal bomb. I use an ambitious range of sentence structures. The first one within the extract on the screen is complex and riskily long, but uses semicolons to split up longer phrases, breaking down the process of creating that perfect Instagram photo. Fittingly, after such a long sentence, this sentence is much shorter, still complex, but leading nicely into a dramatic one-word sentence for effect to end the paragraph on a punchy note. Notice the more sophisticated tone within this section. Hyphenated adjectives such as spur of the moment and oh so relaxed subtly undermine any notion of spontaneity in relation to photos posted by teenagers on Instagram. Whilst there is an important level of detail about what may take place prior to the photo being posted, specific references to TK Maxx and the number of photos taken suggest a detailed knowledge of the area and sophisticated control of purpose and effects. Note the lively subheaders, which once again are aimed at showing an understanding and empathy with the target teenage audience. I deliberately adapt the form to position the reader by starting my final paragraph with similar sentiments to the first paragraph. However, the frustrated God has been replaced by the more accepting, the calmer post advice, yes.
This has been a Schofield on Shakespeare production, showing you exactly what is needed to get full marks within Section B. Many thanks for watching.